Are you ready? Yeah. All your people are here?
Yes, please.
Okay. All right, this is item 40. It's a recommendation of Supervisor Gorell.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. Today's item addresses the state's pending Zone 0 regulations under Assembly Bill 3074, a law passed in 2020 that was originally designed to strengthen defensible space requirements around homes and other properties and reduce wildfire risk. While I believe our county shares the state's goal of improving fire safety, the current draft regulations have evolved in ways that could impose unintended but significant unfunded mandates and remove local discretion. We've seen firsthand the devastation wildfires can bring to our communities, but we must remain proactive in protecting both life and property, and I will continue to champion local initiatives that harden homes and strengthen defensible space. This resolution strikes an important balance, preserving local discretion and allowing communities like ours to implement solutions that fit our unique landscapes, not a one-size-fits-all mandate from Sacramento. I want to start by saying unequivocally that there are no bad actors here. Everyone from the governor's office, the governor himself, all the way down to the Board of Forestry, the legislature, the folks here locally that have had input along the way through the process, to those here with us now, everyone has a common goal and a common vision of preventing the devastating wildfires that we've seen all too often in the last few years. From defensible space to home hardening and fire-wise communities, we're doing great things. We're making great strides. Our fire district and our fire department are among the most advanced in the state. We're enforcing 100-foot clearance zones and proactive inspection programs that have proven effective in protecting lives and property. I think the challenge is that in trying to drive home some of the goals of the 2020 legislation, most recently, it has been hastened, and that desire, that effort to try to drive home regulations with such speed has resulted in some of the efforts missing the target. Unfortunately, the state regulations take a one-size-fits-all approach that doesn't account for regional differences, such as local geography, vegetation, and building codes. If implemented as written, the regulations would create a major unfunded mandate requiring inspections of as much as or more than 60,000 additional properties throughout the county of Ventura. I can tell you that our county fire team does not have that bandwidth to perform additional inspections of 60,000 or more properties countywide, certainly not at the moment. Homeowners could also face thousands of dollars in compliance costs, further straining affordability that we talk about so often from this dais, as well as further exacerbating insurance availability, insurance costs that we talk about so often from this dais. The call here in this item 40, this board letter, is to urge the legislature, the governor, and the State Board of Forestry to restore local control and to allow alternative practices that achieve the same fire-safe outcomes while reflecting local realities. The board letter also calls for updates to the state's fire hazard severity maps to allow for local review and corrections, ensuring that the mapping reflects on-the-ground conditions and mitigation work already completed. These maps are causing issues in practical ways. There is a developer, for example, in my district, Thousand Oaks, that wants to build on a cement lot that's currently there. They want to build a structure that would be Class A fire resistant building on a currently existing cement lot. Half of the lot is in a high severity zone, while the other half is not. It's limiting what can be done to meet the state-issued housing requirements in areas that have mitigated risks. So the fact that our maps have cut this property in half has made it difficult, perhaps impossible, for this developer to complete a project that in no way would enhance or create additional fire risk. So Governor Newsom signed AB 1455 and AB 888 just this month, both intended to strengthen wildfire protections and homeowner protections. While these bills are a step in the right direction, they don't go far enough, and again, as I would suggest, miss the target. AB 1455 simply directs the state to finalize rules for the 5-foot Zone 0 defensible space, and AB 888 sets up a small grant program to help low-income homeowners make fire-safe improvements focused on things like roofs. But neither truly address the broader challenges of implementation, cost, or local flexibility. Communities like ours need clearer timelines, adequate funding, and the authority to develop local alternatives that reflect our unique terrain, vegetation, and neighborhood character. Without dedicated state funding, these regulations shift the cost to local governments and homeowners. The local fire department is going to have to assess a fee for these inspections. And when some of our homeowners perhaps aren't able to pay the fee, what happens next? Do we take a lien against a home from somebody who can't afford to pay a fee against the Zone 0 regulations and ordinances that are in draft form? So we are asking the state to pair regulatory mandates with financial support for inspection staffing, homeowner assistance, and community education, and to implement any new requirements through a phased, regionally adaptable timeline with local flexibility and authority. The broader impact: these overlapping fire insurance and housing regulations are already producing unintended consequences: higher premiums, fewer insurance options, and constraints on new housing development. These regulations also have the potential to completely change the aesthetic of our community neighborhoods at a high cost to residents. We really need a balanced approach so entire communities do not need to chop every tree or take out every shrub. This resolution before us today does not reject fire safety. It seeks to make it more effective, equitable, and locally adaptable. I respectfully ask my colleagues to join me in supporting this resolution to urge the state to revise AB 3074 and the draft Zone 0 rules before they are finalized, to provide additional public input, to provide additional public or local scrutiny and control, that together we can strengthen wildfire resilience while protecting our local control and affordability for Ventura County residents. I've invited 3 speakers today who are here. I'd first like to call up and invite Fire Chief Gardner to provide some context. Chief?
Supervisor Gorell, members of the board, Dr. Johnson for the record, Dustin Gardner, your county fire chief. This is a delicate situation, and it is definitely a needle to thread here as we discuss fire safety in Ventura County, because, as you said, we are no stranger to the devastating effects of wildfire in this county. And there is no science, there are no predictions, there are no professionals in this space that I trust that says it's going to get any better over the next century. It's going to continue to get worse, and we have to acknowledge that. We're going to see the devastating effects of wildfire continue in this county. And in order to mitigate those, we need to be upfront and prevent them, and we need to have a robust emergency response to mitigate them, and then we need to be prepared to deal with them on the backside. And this county and this board has shown the courage and the strength to do all three of those and do them very well. As you mentioned, we have some of the best fire safety regulations in the state that this board has already approved. Our defensible space program, right, our 100-foot. It's an international model that has been developed here in this county, and you have given us the strength and the teeth necessary to enforce that and actually create real change. The building codes that you all have adopted are the most stringent in the state. Our non-combustible construction, our non-combustible roofing, our home hardening ordinances, everything you've put in place for new construction and remodels, you've shown the courage to do that. Now Zone Zero. Zone Zero is coming in, and Zone Zero is a known entity, right? The science backs it, it works. Zone Zero creates a space that keeps homes safe from ember intrusion, right? We've created the homes, the non-combustible homes. We've home hardened them. We're working on the mesh, the ventilation, the ability to keep the embers out. But now Zone Zero reduces that threat from embers washing up against it and starting a fire. But it has to be done appropriately. You've taken the actions to do it with new construction. You've taken the action to do it with remodels, but the legislation as written has zero local control in it. It takes our ability to find alternate means, to find alternate methods, to put common sense to it that fits here in Ventura County instead of a one-size-fits-all from San Diego to Tahoe, right? Those are different fuel models, different risks, different threats, different fuel, different homes, and should have different solutions, and this doesn't allow for that. So I appreciate your effort to bring local control to that, and it's something we've been asking for, to look at it locally, to be able to come up with local solutions that will work. It also is, it's an unrealistic objective, and I hate having my name associated with it. I know you're having your name associated with anything that can't actually be achievable. And a 2029 objective for all homes, existing homes, that's 60,000 homes minimum to change out 0 to 5 feet. It can't happen. There's not the workforce or the means to do it. So we're going to have a rule, an ordinance, or a law in effect that we can't achieve. And my fear with that is if it's not achievable and it's not acquired, then what will be the results when it happens? Right? Somebody's trying to get it done by 2029. They can't find the workforce, or they don't have the funds and they can't get it done. Now, God forsake, they have a fire and they have an insurance claim. What's going to happen to those people? That's my concern with this, is that 2029 objective is just, I don't see it as being achievable. And then the unfunded risk, and you brought that up, and I'm so appreciative that you brought that up, because it's a minimum, best case scenario, a $2 million a year hit to my operations budget, and it'll take us a decade to go through house by house, person by person, homeowner by homeowner to get this done. And I don't see that being achievable. So I appreciate that you're doing this. And like you said in the beginning, there are no bad actors in this. The state of California has been devastated by wildfires. We lost 18,000 homes and 31 lives just earlier this year. That's extreme devastation, and people are trying to find ways to fix that. But as we go through that, the reality is when we sign these into laws and we actually have to put boots on the ground to enforce them, that's where the rubber hits the road, right? And you are trying to fix that piece, and I appreciate that. So while I do support Zone Zero, I do support the science behind it, that it works. As it's written, I don't see it succeeding. So I appreciate you bringing this forward.
Thank you, Chief. I appreciate your comments, and there may be some more questions for you if you wouldn't mind. I'd like to, somebody else who's been a leader on this issue and on the forefront of it is the mayor of Thousand Oaks, David Newman, who I'd like to invite to the podium for remarks. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Supervisor. Good morning, Chair Parvin and supervisors. I am David Newman, Mayor of Thousand Oaks, speaking today as an individual. Let me be blunt. One-size-fits-all Zone Zero rules are a dumb idea. I'm glad the Board of Forestry yesterday posted other options. Still, I believe the resolution before you is very much needed. I urge an update to the resolution to recommend BOF vegetation option 4 and tree option 2, as both of these would provide more locally appropriate measures. As written, Zone Zero presents all 5 of you, and indeed all city councils countywide, with a huge political problem. During the recent drought, we urged residents to do the right thing and install native, drought-tolerant landscaping around their homes. We did this ourselves in government facilities, and we told residents they should do this too. Many heeded the call and spent tens of thousands on landscaping. What do we now tell these residents? That they should rip everything out? That they should install a 5-foot concrete moat around their homes? We were right then, and we should not back off from that now. Many Zone Zero options also fail to adequately distinguish between plant types. Certainly, some vegetation is flammable and does not belong near structures. But current fire science, as we've just heard from Chief Gardner, does not support the removal of all vegetation around every structure. Many plants trap moisture, provide shade, and reduce temperatures. Just saying, let's remove all vegetation creates an enormous baby and bathwater problem. There are also unanswered questions, again, as we just heard, around enforcement and funding. Does the January deadline give the Ventura County Fire Department enough time? Does VCFD have enough inspectors for this greatly expanded task? And if not, who pays to hire those inspectors? And for those closest to the fire risk, VCFD's own experts in fire science, do they even agree that any of this is a good idea? Because there are so many unanswered questions, I support adoption of this resolution with the recommended modifications. I hope the Board of Forestry listens. This would allow more flexibility and more regional adaptability while still providing protection. Protection we all agree is needed and will best protect our residents, our structures, and our environment. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. I'd now like to invite up Dr. Betsy Conley, who's been a leader on this and has one of the most comprehensive websites for community education. Thank you, Dr. Conley.
Thank you. I came here today to thank Supervisor Gorell for taking a lead by listening to the concerns that a group I formed, Zone Zero Conejo Valley, had about the upcoming regulations, and to extra thank him for hosting a town hall panel where we got a chance to hear from experts and from the community about the process and the concerns that the public had. I really appreciate that. And I also came here today to voice my support for this particular resolution and for the county's engagement with the State Board of Forestry and the Zone Zero Advisory Committee on these issues. Yesterday, something new happened, which is that for the first time, the Zone Zero Board of Forestry Advisory Committee published a set of options on what Zone Zero treatment of vegetation and trees might look like. This is the absolute first time that we have heard anything like this from them. And we're delighted, but we're also concerned because those options range from don't change anything from last month's draft to make the changes that my group and groups all over the state and city councils and counties have been advocating for. So we're not done. Mayor Newman mentioned that there is a vegetation option, option 4, and a tree option, option 2, that both he and I support, something that recognizes the realities that our fire chief mentioned, and that will create the protection in Zone Zero that homes in high-risk areas in the county should have. Does both things. It's great. So on Thursday, the Zone Zero Advisory Committee is going to meet to talk about this. And then on November 3rd, the Zone Zero Board of Forestry Advisory Committee is going to meet again, and we believe that they are going to publish a recommendation, which will then be heard the next day for the entire Board of Forestry. That will be November 4th. So this is the end. We're right there. And if we're going to make a difference here, the Zone Zero Advisory Committee needs to hear you and hear us about the concerns that we have before they meet on the 3rd. And then the Board of Forestry needs to know, the entire Board of Forestry needs to know the position of counties, cities, fire chiefs, community members on the issue. That is how we will end up with a regulation that is doable, affordable, and respects the character of our communities, the biodiversity of our communities, the need to cool our communities. It's all there if we can get them to stick on option 4 for vegetation and option 2 for trees. And I appreciate all of you being willing to hear this and to help make this happen. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Conley. I'll summarize, I'll wrap up and then we can open it to questions. But if the board adopts the resolution and the board letter as presented today, we'll join other jurisdictions. We're not alone. There's other counties. The city of Los Angeles has taken a position in opposition to the current draft. And I've communicated with Michelle Guzman, who is prepared that if the board does vote for this today, to help us communicate the message to Sacramento, to the Board of Forestry, to the governor's office, to the legislature, amplifying what other jurisdictions have shared. Because if a tree falls in the woods and no one's there, does it make a sound? We need to make sure that if we do vote and take a position today, that's communicated to Sacramento quickly and effectively. And thank you, Ms. Guzman, for your coordination on that. The last thing I'll say is that this really just calls upon the state of California to tap the brakes. To tap the brakes so that we can possibly extend the deadline, take additional public input, but most importantly, revise for more local control. More local control in what the maps look like, which if we don't get that local control, we won't have another chance to make any changes to those maps for another 5 years. And it's huge impact to our constituents. So it's more local control for not just the maps, but also the Zone Zero ordinances and their implementation. It's also a chance to tap the brakes and to more fully understand inspection, enforcement, and resources required to implement the massive scope of what the state is trying to accomplish. So with that, I'm happy to turn it back to you, Madam Chair, and open it up for any questions.
Questions? Comment. Supervisor LaVere has a comment.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And Supervisor Gorell, thank you so much for putting this on the agenda today. And Mayor Newman, Dr. Connolly, thank you for being here and your comments and all of the advocacy you're doing in your community. I've heard a lot about this in my district as well. And I think everyone agrees, like you said, that Zone Zero, the regs are well-intentioned, but everyone has so many concerns about how they're going to be implemented. And I share all of the concerns that you noted today, particularly the fact that we need to give local jurisdictions more control over how that implementation takes place. We know our risk, we know our vegetation, we know our neighborhoods, we know the community needs better than a one-size-fits-all policy coming down from Sacramento. And we need to be focusing on local outcomes and results, not just adhering to rules that, as I think the chief said, would be in effect from San Diego to Tahoe. everybody's different needs. We need the flexibility to meet those needs at the local level. And then, as you mentioned, funding. This is another unfunded mandate, both for our local residents who, tens and tens and tens of thousands are now in these high fire zones, and some in vulnerable and disadvantaged communities who simply can't afford what Zone 0 requires. And we need to be able to provide funding to these residents. And then we also obviously need to be also to be able to provide funding to our fire district. Putting this burden on them with no associated funding is not reasonable, both from a timing perspective and then a budgetary perspective. That needs to change as well. So I absolutely support this, and I really appreciate you bringing this to the board today.
Supervisor Long.
Thank you very much. Zone 0 has really been fast and furious since Palisades, Easton, Mountain Fire. I really wanted to say to Chief Gardner and Fire Chief Morelli, thank you so much for representing us at the state level. Michelle Guzman and I were there when you were talking to a subcommittee, and we had Senator Lamone there, Assemblyman Stern. And I understand their comments, and I appreciate them listening to us, because this is a very important issue. And thank you to Supervisor Gorell and Parvin for having those town halls in your areas. You had a lot of residents coming out and really speaking against how quickly this is moving and what it is. We've really, at this board, talked about those fire maps and how off and rigid they are. And we also, in our legislative platform, have local control, and we don't need unfunded mandates. We need them funded. So this goes completely with what we're talking about, and I really do appreciate it. One thing, as we talk about this, you're right. I think it doesn't fit one size fits all. In Ventura County, we have suburban, urban, rural areas. I think of this as it goes with my ag, with all the avocado and lemon trees versus a house on a well. What are we all doing here? And how does that fit within, you're in Thousand Oaks, and you just did all this great landscaping that you're trying to do. And so it doesn't all fit the same. And I really do think we need local control on this, because in the fire maps, I will say that the Camarillo Outlet Mall is in the fire zone, which we all know is not right. Just as one example, the same example for what you're saying, we're trying to do housing and we can't get that done. So I appreciate the frustrations that we have, and hopefully with the leaders that we have in the state, they hear us, especially when some are our very own electeds, could help us to really mitigate this. And so I would ask if also your recommendation, I think, is to add it to our legislative platform. I would like to make sure we do that as well, along with what we're doing, because on the state level for CSAC, California State Association of Counties, we're all struggling for this. And I think that more counties need to take actions like this. So I really appreciate you bringing this up today. Thank you.
Supervisor Lopez.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Supervisor Gorell, for bringing this item forward. I appreciate the information that both Mayor Newman and Ms. Connolly have shared. I was trying to figure out what exactly was happening, so I appreciate the information. So to that, I have curious about, with this rulemaking process or this regulation being considered, the changes, and this hearing on November 4th, but I understand that there's also a meeting this week, and where the balance is of the legislation you mentioned, if that legislation got ahead of the regulation being considered, how is that reconciled? If they're just trying to figure out, like, what exactly are we doing? And is it pursuing legislation in the future, or is this an addition? Did the legislation that was signed recently not address some of these issues? Trying to kind of reconcile everything.
Yeah, I think that's a good question. I think what we're trying to accomplish here is to take an official position as a county so that two things could be considered. One is that the Board of Forestry is currently in this very rapid effort to develop final ordinances can take into consideration our concerns. Concerns that we heard today and we've heard, and some of them are articulated in the resolution and the board letter. So the development of those of language is by this agency that's been identified to quickly develop the ordinances, so the Zone 0 ordinances. But it's also a broader call for the legislature and the governor to do what we'll call additional cleanup legislation on top of what they just signed this week. That cleanup legislation would be really to bake into the overall ordinance the local control, perhaps on the maps, the ability to modify the maps by the local agencies, and do so more than just every 5 years, which is kind of currently with the cycle we're on, and to do cleanup legislation that will identify funding and resources. We know the legislature's out of session right now, so the governor and the legislature can't fix the actual underlying legislation right now, but they could early next year. And if enough communities like ours add on to the communications to Sacramento, I think we can drive a positive outcome through that collective voice. And that's what this is. So some of it could happen immediately, as Ms. Conley's represented, but some of it will probably be the responsibility of the legislature and the governor next year.
Thank you. So, to the comment from Supervisor Long about the legislative platform, if Ms. Guzman can, just curious if that isn't already in there, and question if there was any comment or any position that the county took on the two bills that were recently passed and signed.
Thank you so much, Supervisor Lopez. Good morning, I think still morning. Board, for the record, Michelle Guzman, Government Affairs Manager for the county. To answer your question, Supervisor, no, we did not take a position on either AB 1455 or AB 888, which Supervisor Gorell referenced in his comments. So we did not go on record one way or the other. And then as far as the legislative platform is concerned, we do have existing language in several places that I think would be a good fit to support this resolution, should it be the direction of the board. As Supervisor Long noted, we have very strong language about unfunded or underfunded mandates, and then also maintaining local control as two of the main policy pillars that we pursue every year. There's also language in the fire resiliency section, and I don't have it right in front of me, but basically any effort that's going to help us support effective wildfire mitigation, but also resources to support those activities. So there is some existing language in the platform that would allow us to act immediately should we wish to engage with the rulemaking process that's just been referenced, or should your board determine that the most recently passed legislation either wasn't clear or didn't go far enough in kind of stating elements of local control or referencing fire maps, which I believe AB 1455 didn't reference fire maps at all. If there's elements or items that your board would like to pursue, we do have existing language and can do that accordingly.
So do you have information on the timeline for the rulemaking process? Because, I mean, what would it look like with our decisions going to be made by November 4th? And at that point, when do they become effective to either pursue legislation or clean up legislation?
So it sounds like Dr. Connolly may have a little more contemporary information than I do on the board. I do not follow the rulemaking process as closely. What I can say is that there was an urgency clause as part of AB 1455 that urged the Board of Forestry to essentially finalize by December 31st. So in that vein, I think Dr. Connolly may be able to speak more to that.
Thanks. So the Board of Forestry was charged with the responsibility through Governor Newsom's executive order to have a final regulation for Zone 0 on December 31st. So that still stands. So the things that have happened since then have been about recognizing that the timeline was too short for certain required details, and it allows the Board of Forestry to put something into effect before December 31st, and then put it back out again for a second put it into effect. It's really just a workaround. So the Board of Forestry is scheduled to meet for the last time for the year right now, November 4th. Is it possible that they might meet in December? It's possible. They could have a special meeting, but clearly the clock is ticking and time is running out. There was no indication in the governor's recent letter that indicated that he was planning on slowing the process. There's absolutely nothing in that letter. And so I think that it's going to happen. And one of the concerns that my group and groups all over the state have is once that's happened, that gives insurance companies pretty much free license to cite those regulations as the standard that I have to meet in order to keep my homeowner's insurance. And so many of us are concerned that we can't wait for fixes next year or the year after. We need to do the very best we can with these regulations, these Zone 0 regulations now, so that the insurance companies don't take that as permission to start heavy-handed enforcement against individual homeowners. So we think that November 4th is the end.
Got it. Thank you. So it seems that the idea would be to submit the resolution with the meeting that's taking place this week as well?
I would suggest so.
Oh, you're my-
Immediate transmission. I'm going to turn this on. I would suggest so, Supervisor Lopez, that we would, if supported today by the board, we would immediately transmit it to the Board of Forestry. But even if the Board of Forestry were to miraculously develop a set of ordinances that everyone in the state supported, because it created maybe even some local flexibility with the implementation, which I'm suggesting waving a magic wand. I don't think that's going to happen. But even if they did, it still leaves alone some of the things that Chief Gardner brought up with the, in his own words, unachievable scope of the vast, enormous amount of the inspections and enforcement that would have to follow, even if the Zone 0 ordinances themselves turned out to be more acceptable. But so we've got the short fuse target of getting our message out to the Board of Forestry, and then the work that needs to be done early next year with the reconvening of the legislature to articulate what's next. And I would like to ask the mayor to share, if you would.
Thank you, Supervisor, and thank you, Supervisor Lopez, for your questions. There are two pieces we're dealing with here. One is legislative, the two bills that were referenced. There is a signing statement I think the governor made that called for some balance and some flexibility, although it's not clear to me exactly when the rubber hits the road how that gets carried out. The other piece is that all of us are familiar with there is a 3-year cycle of codes, of building codes and fire safety codes. And ordinarily, these get revved every 3 years. It's pretty much a pro forma item. The Thousand Oaks City Council adopted chapters 1, 2, and 5 of those codes in its most recent meeting a couple of weeks ago, actually 2 weeks ago today. We did not adapt chapter 6, which is vegetation in firefighting because of jurisdiction. That falls under the jurisdiction of the Ventura County Fire Department, of which this board is effectively the board of directors. And even if Thousand Oaks had jurisdiction here, which it does not, but even if it did, it would have been problematic to adopt that because it's not yet known what the final Zone Zero regulations will be. So to your question, how does this happen and when? Time is very much of the essence. This does need to get, input needs to get to the Board of Forestry right away, because for all of these codes, including Chapter 6, which is called goes by the ungainly name of the California Wildland Urban Interface Code, or CAWIC, quite a mouthful. We don't know what that will be yet, but they're saying that will all go into effect January 1st. So time is very much of the essence on that. Again, thanks for your question.
Thank you. Thank you both for the additional information. And as we were sitting here, just a side note that there was a newsletter information about a statewide insurance town hall with the California Fire Chief. So very timely as we're discussing this. So it's happening next week. So thank you, Supervisor.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, I'm going to say a few words. And then we'll go to public comment. Okay, we've had a number of town halls in our districts. I look at the way that this is being done similar to how FEMA decides where the flood maps are. It's very similar to me. It looks like a duplication of effort. So again, we lose local control. It's an unfunded mandate. I ran into a gentleman on Sunday at the picnic at the Knolls who told me that his big oak tree, coastal oak tree in his front yard, has to be taken down according to his insurance carrier. And frankly, it's absolutely a beautiful tree, but apparently it's going over part of his roof. So not only does he just has to let it go. They won't let him just trim it. So these are, having insurance companies dictate I'm not comfortable with that as well. We had the Regional Fire Council, Ventura County Regional Fire Council, come out to my district where we talked about Zone Zero, what it looks like in reality. And when you talked about this concrete moat around your house, I think that everyone was in shock on how unrealistic it is. And I know that you can't do it in that time frame. And it isn't even realistic. How many people can remove palm trees? And there's a lot of palm trees. I don't think it's reasonable. I don't think it's feasible. So I definitely support what you've brought forward and your community has brought forward. I know that I believe my district would be very supportive of this. So, all right, now we're ready for public comment. So do we have any speakers on this item?
Chair Parvin, there are no requests to speak for this item. Thank you.
There's one.
I wasn't planning on being here today. I just came here to do something else, and I saw you're having a hearing on this. I live in Lake Sherwood, Thousand Oaks, unincorporated area. A couple things. I think if the state has control, they're going to make this so impossible for everybody out there. And then the second thing is, insurance companies right now are raising the rates through the roof. Mm-hmm. They're finding every reason to cancel you. So if they have this thing to rely on, they could say, well, you don't have the foliage you took back. We're canceling you. So then the person gets canceled. They have 30 days to do what needs to be done. And if it's an old person or somebody on fixed income, they can't do that. All right. The other thing is I don't know how much money you lost in property tax revenue during the Woolsey fire. All right. When the Woolsey fire hit, I lived in Lake Sherwood. We were very lucky. We were the donut hole. For some reason, it never hit us. But I remember the Monrovia Fire Department came by my house and they said, "What are you doing on the roof?" I said, "I'm covering all my roof vents with sheet metal. I want to make sure the embers don't get in my roof because my house was built in 2004, so I don't have the automatic vents like you're talking about." So I think if everybody had a skin in the game, let's say the County of Ventura, you get a lot of revenue from property taxes, all right? So the Woolsey fire probably wiped out a lot of property tax revenue, just like it did in Palisades, all right? So if you could prevent the house from burning down, you're still getting that property tax revenue. The person doesn't have to rebuild and wait a year or two to rebuild. The roof vents, one thing that I knew that these firemen told me was when the fire hit Oak Park, they lost a lot of houses because it was 2,000 degrees outside. Even though it was 100 degrees outside, the attics were hot. It doesn't matter. That's freezing weather to the firestorm. It goes right to the roof attic, right in the vent, and the embers are inside your attic and your house burns down. You don't even know the house is on fire until it's gone. So the automatic roof vents are really, I'm planning on doing it right now. I'm trying to figure out who to use and what it costs, but maybe have some sort of rebate program for maybe fixed people, maybe not people in Sherwood, but where you get a rebate on your property taxes if you put in these preventive measures on your property. And in the long run, it's going to save you money because you're not going to lose property tax revenue when that $3 million or $1 million or $500,000 house burns down. And then I know you lose property tax revenue, but you're going to lose a lot more property tax revenue if 1,000 houses burn down. Another thing, during the Woolsey fire, they're talking about the stuff around your house, all right? There were some houses in North Ranch that burned down because they had a lot of wood bark. So there's things that you can mitigate by saying don't put wood bark near your house, all right? So I think that's a good thing, but you got to keep it local. You can't let the state have a mandate because they're never going to let go of it. They're going to keep it forever and ever and ever. So that's all I had to say.
Would you
Thank
like to
you.
provide your name for record?
Douglas Sullivan.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
And is there any other members of the public in our audience who would like to provide public comment on this item? Thank you. Thank you, Chair Parvin.
Madam Chair, I'll just conclude by saying that this story will continue beyond today's vote and into next year for sure and beyond. But I do know that our Regional Fire Safe Council is doing amazing work, and they're standing up these Firewise communities, and those Firewise communities are recipients of grants, and they're helping people that don't have the resources to do the kind of things that were described with the vents and home hardening. So we need to find ways to continue on supporting that kind of work, and we obviously will, but that's the kind of local things that I think are making a big difference to prevent that next massive wildfire. So with that, I'd like to move this measure. Thank you.
Can I ask one question?
Yeah.
Michelle, if you could just ask, so the recommendations here, 1 through 3, I'm very supportive. Is there anything else you need to have to add it to our legislative platform? Or do we also need to include that in the motion?
No modifications are required, so we can move forward.
Thank you very much.
I see what you're saying. If I may ask Mayor Newman to come back up, because I missed it earlier because I was taking his comments to mean he was recommending to the Board of Forestry that they adopt the option, but you're suggesting that this county take a position and specifically support the option with the greatest flexibility that's currently on the table by the Board of Forestry. Is that accurate?
It is. Thank you, Supervisor, for that question.
Yeah.
Both Dr. Connolly and I are endorsing a minor modification to the resolution. Please correct me if this is wrong, but I think it's vegetation option 4 and tree option 2. So the Board of Forestry yesterday came out with an additional menu of options that would provide somewhat more flexibility. And the most flexible of these are vegetation option 4 and tree option 2. So if those could be added to the resolution, I think that would gain us the greatest amount of local adaptability and control.
And it boils down to really a flexibility issue. It's not necessarily a menu of what trees, yes, in or out. It's more of here's the flexibility of local control in these categories. Is that?
Option 4 in writing, and here's, if you want to read it.
Thank you.
Here's 2.
Thank you. So yes, that's correct. It does not specify species, for example, saying this type of plant is okay and this other one is not. It does, there are various numbers. There are more for vegetation, 1 through 4. But for both vegetation and trees, the key point is that 4 for vegetation, 2 for trees are the most flexible
Yeah.
and will afford the most local control.
Thank you. Thank you very much for clarifying that. And I'm sorry I missed it in your testimony. I took it to be more of you were speaking to the ether, hoping that the Board of Forestry was listening and that you wanted them to drill down on solidifying that as their final in November 3rd. But obviously my board letter and the resolution were composed before the most recent draft was published. And the most recent draft does have more flexibility options for local control. So I would offer to the board the idea that we adopt the language in the board letter and the resolution, but also add to it specifically taking the position of more flexibility granted under vegetation option 4 and tree option number 2. Is that something that the Board of Supervisors would entertain? Yes. Okay.
Yeah.
So with that, I would move the item 40 with the amendment as just described, the adoption of that very specific language, really, while also foot stomping local control, not just in those areas, but in all the areas. But with that, I would move item 40.
I will second that.
Supervisor Gorell, just to note that if in the motion to make it clear that it's the options as presented on the October 23rd, because if it changes, yeah.
Yes, absolutely. As much as we can to clarify that specific statement right there.
I understand the intent, and we'll add that language to the resolution to be clear.
Thank you.
All right. Item 40, motion to approve recommendations as stated in the board letter with modifications to the resolution as specified. Moved by Supervisor Gorell, second by Supervisor Parvin. Please vote. That passes unanimously. Thank you.
Okay, I think we could go into closed session right now.